My body shot forward through a tunnel of lights and colors until finally I found myself flying into the sand. I let out a shriek before my body slammed down into the warm sand and my wand flew from my grasp.
Kira! Are you okay?
I groaned, pulling my face from the dunes and glancing at Kieran.
Just peachy.
Slowly, I pulled myself from the ground, groaning as I brushed the gritty sand out of my skirt and hair. I gave my tail and ears a shake before looking around, finding the three of us somewhere in the middle of a desert.
So, this is the crystal desert. Where's the crystals?
I asked Kieran. He walked up to me, grabbed my shoulders, and turned me around.
That, my adorable little friend, is one of them.
I gasped in surprise as I eyed the large 40-foot crystal shooting up out of the sand. The bright blue crystal was shimmering in the sunlight, the light's beams shooting off in all different directions.
I wonder if that's what ogres use as dildos.
Cora muttered as she observed the crystal.
You're so gross,
I told her as I crossed my arms.
Hey, just saying. If I was a 60-foot walking mess, that crystal would look mighty nice to my folds.
Cora commented with a chuckle. Once again, gross. Seconds later, another flash of light appeared above us. I turned to watch as Liru fell to the ground, Aldren beside her. The two slammed into the sand, Liru's katana falling beside her and Aldren's starblade following.
Brooke! Aldren-kun!
I exclaimed, rushing towards the two.
I thought I told you not to call me that,
Liru told me in her usual cold tone of voice.
Sorry, slip of the tongue,
I apologized as I helped her up. But after helping Liru off the ground, it was then I saw it. The large bloody wound on Aldren's back, a puncture dug deep into his skin. One of the hornets must have caught him by surprise and managed to grab him.
Oh my god!
I exclaimed, kneeling down beside him.
Let me see!
Kieran shouted as he rushed towards Aldren. He helped the young boy up, scanning the health bar above his head as it slowly ticked down.
He's been infected with the poison energy effect, Tier 3.
Cut out the mumbo-jumbo. Is the kid gonna be okay or not?
Kieran shrugged.
Depends on whether or not we can find a place with a healer NPC.
Most towns have one, so that shouldn't be difficult.
Cora scoffed before staring off into the distance.
Speak for yourself. We're in the middle of fucking nowhere. The only town for any miles ain't anywhere in rendering distance.
And without Jack and Katie, we don't exactly have a guide around these parts. Any chance anyone's familiar with the area?
None of us answered. We were all in new territory, which was bad on Aldren's part. I looked towards him, whimpering as I eyed his pained expression. He was unconscious, but I could tell he could still feel the pain.
Well, let's head in one direction and pray for a miracle. If you've got a decent GPU, shove your rendering distance to the max. We can't afford any missteps.
Kieran waved his staff and levitated Aldren's body up before we took off across the desert, running towards the setting sun on the horizon. I ran beside Aldren, clutching my wand close to my chest as I did so. If any harm came to us, I had to protect him. We kept running, and the sun kept setting and setting. Eventually, the five of us came to a stop, staring around at our surroundings to find ourselves just like we had been for the past hour, in the middle of nowhere.
And once again, we're lost. Doesn't anyone have a map?
Cora exclaimed.
Mine doesn't indicate any individual settlements,
Liru said in a defeated tone.
I'm running out of mana potions, and I'm barely able to keep his health over 20%. Either someone comes up with a plan, or we're screwed.
Why don't we just let him die and then collect his stuff after he respawns?
Cora suggested. I glared at her.
First of all, we're not letting him die! Second, he'd respawn at the last settlement we visited, all the way back in Pandora City!
Well, isn't that for the good then?
Said Cora.
I mean, why keep carrying him if he's not as good as the rest of us? Seeing as we've already got a sword user, and he's the only one of us that got stung.
The only reason he's in this state is because he got stung saving me!
The succubus stopped, muttering a quiet bundle of words before going silent.
Oh, sorry.
Her cocky attitude seemed to fade as soon as she was met with hostility. I made a mental note to just yell at her whenever she took her antics too far. Well, assuming she'd be sticking around for the long run. Kieran sighed, shaking his head.
If we're going to find a way out of this desert, then we're going to have to...
He stopped in the middle of his sentence, his mouth still held open. Liru and I turned our heads to look at where he was looking, but only saw a lone cactus.
What?
She asked.
That cactus. I swear it just...
Something rustled from behind me and I darted around with my wand drawn. However, there was nothing there other than another cactus a mere 2 yards away. We're being watched, I told them as my fluffy ears perked up in response. And just like that, the creature revealed themselves. I spun around and aimed my wand, watching as 2 glowing eyes appeared on the cactus. One by one, the cacti began to hop up, 2 black feet sprouting from their bottoms.
The hell? Night of the Living Cactus?
Cora exclaimed.
I don't know what they are, but keep your eyes peeled.
2 rushed at my sister, but she was able to cut through the 2 with ease. Despite being fake, their durability seemed to be the same strength as an actual cactus. One charged at me and I dodged, rolling through the sand before blasting it apart with a spell.
Sunflower Stream!
A yellow burst of magic tore the cactus apart, sending pieces of green plant flying in all directions. I smiled, turning around and blasting several more apart with magic. Beside me, Cora and Kieran were managing to hold them off as well. Cora was knocking them aside with her staff, while Kieran zapped them with lightning, shooting fireballs as well. It seemed like this battle was in the bag, at least until the ground began to shake. I immediately rushed towards Aldren, kneeling down beside him and pouring another bottle of health potion in his mouth. As the last drop hit his lip, a new monster appeared. Liru, Cora, Kieran, and I backed up as a large tentacled creature burst out of the sand, snapping its sharp jaws upward savagely. The ground around it began to collapse, pulling us towards its mouth with ease.
Quick! Back away!
Liru shouted. I grabbed Aldren's body with magic and knocked it aside as one of the tentacles slammed into me, knocking me to the ground. I groaned as my body rolled through the sand, feeling like all my breath was suddenly torn from my lungs. I got up to see the tentacle monster's arm wrapped around Cora, holding her up like a prize while Kieran and Liru fought it. Seconds later, another tentacle grabbed Kieran and then another grabbed my sister.
Let them go, you big meanie!
I shouted as I got back up.
When I said I wanted my life to be like hentai, this is not what I meant!
Cora screamed. I began to scroll through my spellbook in my mind, trying to figure out what would best suit the situation. Fire wouldn't cut it, its skin was already dry and rough. Water would dry up too fast in this heat, so that was out of the question too.
Ice it is then,
I thought to myself. I held up my wand and shouted.
Shivering Frost Wave!
A thick layer of frost shot forward from my wand, covering the monster and its tentacles with ice. It let out a violent screech as the attack began to drain its health bar and its tentacles began to freeze over. However, something grabbed me from behind and tossed me to the ground, interrupting my attack. I watched as my wand fell out of reach and rolled over to find 2 cacti monsters in front of me. The 2 reached down to grab me with their prickly branches, but I kicked one aside before rolling away from the other. I rushed towards Kieran's staff, picking it up and blasting the other cactus monster with it. I prepared to attack the tentacle creature once again, but a third cactus monster popped out of the sand and began spinning around, shooting thick spines towards me. Several pierced my leg and I fell to the ground, dropping a staff from my hand. I reached over to grab it, but another cactus monster stomped down on my hand.
Ow!
I yelled. Slowly, more and more cactus monsters began to surround me, and I turned my head to see the tentacle monster having broken free of the ice spell. It was slowly lowering Kieran towards its mouth, preparing to snack on the young elf boy.
Let me go!
I shouted, trying to break free from the cactus men. It seemed all was lost, and it was until a lone silhouette appeared in the distance. I watched as a glowing golden blast tore through one of the monsters, and then another blasted apart the one stomping on my hand. I stared in awe as the man approached the battle, firing 2 golden revolvers at the incoming waves of cactus creatures with ease. Every 6 shots, he took a break, dodging attacks before continuing his attack. Within less than a minute, he was able to dispatch all of them and moved on to the tentacle creature. He aimed and fired 3 times at the monster's eye, causing it to cry out in pain. He then aimed his other revolver, blasting each of its tentacles and causing them to drop my 3 companions. The tentacle creature sunk into the sand, disappearing after suffering from the mysterious stranger's attack. With heavy breath, I turned back around, watching as the stranger held out his hand to me.
Need any help, partner?
Ah! Finally, I could see. I didn't know how long I was out, but judging from the massive change of scenery, it had to at least have been a few hours. I was sitting on an old cot in some weird house, the walls made of old wood and draped with paintings and other weird treasures. To my left was a small western-like kitchen, fit with a large beer keg and several mugs sitting on the table, and at that table were my companions.
He's awake!
Kieran exclaimed.
Aldren-kun!
A familiar voice shouted. Kira jumped onto me, crushing my spleen as she hugged me. Behind her were Kieran and Liru, and next to them the girl from before, Cora, I think. And behind her was another man that I didn't recognize at all. He looked like a cowboy, basically wearing the generic outfit I'd imagine any cowboy to wear. A tattered brown jacket under a large red cloth wrapped around his neck and covering his left arm. He had a faint mustache, and the rest of his hair was overgrown and messy, a brown Stetson sitting upon it. "Who's McCree?" I asked sarcastically. Kira looked over to the man, smiling.
This is Anton. He helped us get here.
"And where exactly are we?" I asked, sitting up.
Welcome to the Six Shooters Gulch, little man. I reckon it's your first time here.
Anton said, reaching out to shake my hand. Yeah, I answered, shaking his hand nervously.
Well, I'll give all y'all the grand tour in a few. Just let me grab my weapons and we'll head out,
he said in a Western accent before walking up the stairs beside the kitchen. I shrugged, accepting the weirdness I'd awoken to, before glancing forward at the young wolf girl standing beside Kieran. She was staring down at the ground nervously, kind of like I did whenever I was being forced into the center of attention during class. I gestured for her to come over, and she did, stepping past Kira, who hopped back over to the table. She looked down at me with eyes not filled with hatred, but remorse.
Aldren,
You don't have to say it. I know.
No, Aldren. I'm sorry for being such a bitch to you.
It's fine, Liru. I'm used to getting hated on a lot. Can I just know why?
You remind me of a boy I used to know. We didn't part on good terms.
Oh. Well, I hope if we ever say goodbye, it'll be on better ones, I said with a faint smile. She smiled weakly and walked over to the bed. She put her hand out and I took it, locking fingers with her.
Friends?
Friends. Immediately after, Anton walked downstairs and announced loudly,
Well, now that I'm armed and ready, who wants to go drinking?
Cora immediately raised her hand, but the rest of us looked at him with suspicion. I got up off the bed, seeing my star blade lying against it. I grabbed it and sheathed the blade, following everyone as we walked out the door. One by one, we exited the building, emerging on a long, sandy road with old wooden buildings on each side. It was just like I imagined an old western town to look like. The buildings were old and wooden, some cracked and others crooked. Hastily painted signs hung above each door, the one we were heading to labeled Saloon. I could already hear the bustling laughs and loud music from across the road.
This place is one of the backwater towns in this region. That's why I was able to get my place so cheap. That building in a better town like Edgeburg or Kentucky Forest would cost a fortune.
Anton told us.
Yes, that is certainly visible.
Kieran muttered as he glanced at two drunks passed out next to the saloon. Anton led us into the saloon, and almost immediately after we stepped through the sliding gates, every pair of eyes in the room aimed at us. One by one, all the patrons began to stare in our direction, some with surprise, and others with hatred.
Don't make eye contact. They smell fear. Go back to your drinks unless you want a round in your shoulder,
Anton announced afterwards. Almost immediately, they all returned to what they were doing, the jukebox in the corner resuming its song as well. The place looked nice for an old western building. The bar was nice and shiny and took up an entire wall, and behind it the shelves were lined with different drinks. The other side of the place was filled with tables, a few booths and 2 pool tables. 2 men were playing on one, gambling world chips. Anton led us over to the far end of the saloon, sitting us all down at a booth. I sat between Kira and Cora, which was a little awkward, but acceptable. Anton, Liru, and Kieran all sat on the other side.
So how'd you guys end up all the way out here? The NPCs on the route should have given you directions not to stray off the path or travel at night.
Anton asked us.
We didn't take the direct route here. We took the shortcut instead. Didn't realize the shortcut would send us out in the middle of nowhere, though.
Oh, the old hornet's nest. Yeah, those black and yellow buggers are a bitch to get by. At least once a week, I come across a player or two wandered into town covered in stingers.
Mr. Hero here is the only one who got stung in our case. Well, except for 2 others who were with us. They didn't make it.
Liru told him, her voice dropping as she spoke. Neither Jack nor Katie had come to mind since I had passed out. The last time I saw them, Jack was trapped in honey and Katie was struggling to fight off the boss. With 3 of us already through the portal and Liru having to drag my unconscious body, she probably wasn't able to save either of them.
Well, that's unfortunate. Any idea if they've responded?
Kieran shrugged.
It's been a few hours and they haven't contacted us, so either they're ghosting us,
Or they're still trapped inside.
That thought had also not occurred to me. If the queen bee decided not to kill them, but instead to imprison them inside the hive, what would happen? Would they slowly starve to death as their health bar depleted, or would they stay trapped there until someone rescued them?
Well, prayers to your friends.
Anton said as he held up his beer mug, a bright green liquid summoning appearing inside.
Now, why exactly have the lot of you come here?
We've taken on the champion quest, I told him. He chuckled.
You're not serious, are you?
Kira opened her menu, scrolling to the quest menu. The last quest on the list was the same listed in mine, and probably the others too. 1 out of the 5 goals had been completed, that being the defeat of the Warlock King by our hands.
Well, I'll be darned. You managed to beat old Magic Missile up there.
He said with a chuckle. Kira then swapped to her inventory, where she pointed out the Master Wand stored in one of her last slots. Almost immediately after spotting it, Anton closed the menu forcefully, glancing around at other patrons at the bar.
Keep your inventory closed, Foxy. No offense, but you're kind of the definition of prey for guys like these. Small, cute, vulnerable.
You not like the rest of them?
Liru asked skeptically.
Would I have saved you if I wasn't? I could have let the monster eat you and taken your loot for myself.
He did have a good point. Kira scoffed at Anton.
I'm not small, or cute, or vulnerable.
Kira shot Anton a glare, trying her best to intimidate him with just her facial expressions. However, it had the completely opposite effect. Anton burst into laughter, his Western accent faltering.
Oh my god, you look like my niece whenever my bro tells her to go to bed.
Shut up!
Kira exclaimed before crossing her arms, putting on a pouty face. I looked towards her and she looked back, her eyes filled with innocence. I immediately looked away again, my cheeks rosy red.
Damn, though, the champion wand. Only about 14 people have been able to collect all 5 artifacts, but none get past the tower. Only about 1,000 were barely able to get one.
He told us. Liru spoke up in her usual mysterious voice.
Well, we intend to get the rest and beat the tower. Do you know where we need to go next?
Anton smiled.
Sure, but it'll cost you.
Bribery? I asked. He shook his head.
Money means nothing to me. I got enough to keep myself happy. What I want is a duel. A good and clean duel.
Liru growled, but I held her back. What kind of duel?
1v1, of course. My twin pistols versus whatever weapons you got. Magic, swords, bows, whatever you specialize in. It's been a while since I've been in a decent fight against someone without a 6-shooter.
Anton said to us. He put out his hand, giving me a charming smile. I smiled as well and took it. Anton didn't seem like a villain or anything. He seemed honest, a trait he shared with very little people at this bar.
Well, maybe. But what's up with your gun? Why is it all glowy and stuff?
Asked Kira as she opened up her platter to reveal a glass bowl filled with chocolate cold ice cream. He pulled his gun from his holster and dropped it on the table, revealing it more closely. It looked to be a revolver, but weird. It was one of the older ones from the Wild West, and it had a few gears sticking out of it, like some kind of steampunk pistol, something you'd see at a fantasy antique shop among the half-naked fairy statues and dragon eggs. He opened the chamber to reveal not bullets, but a glowing glass core. Golden energy was flowing inside, the source of the revolver's shots.
Unlike the rest of these guys who got to restock on ammo, my gun is limitless. 6 rounds made of pure light energy.
Kira took it, looking into the glow like it was some kind of precious treasure. Liru snatched it from her before she could get close, throwing it back to Anton.
Sorry. She really likes shiny things.
Anton opened his platter, revealing a shot glass of the nameless green liquid. He took the shot at once and slammed the glass down after. However, there was no bottle to refill it, as the shot just refilled itself.
Hey, where'd Cora go?
We looked up to see Cora approaching a man on the other side of the bar. She was leaning over his table, exposing her cleavage to two cowboys staring down at her.
Well, boys, you want to grab a drink and head down to your places?
She asked. Kieran whispered to me.
Is she really trying to pick those guys up?
I shrugged and he frowned.
I knew succubus were promiscuous, but I never thought it was this bad.
Anton stood up from the booth.
Damn it, I know those two. They're wanted men. If she goes with them, she's screwed.
He marched over to their table as the two cowboys stood up, smirking at the young girl. However, before they could snatch up the young succubus, Anton intervened.
Sorry, boys, but she's not for sale. And this gun of mine trumps that.
The scene changed in an instant. One of the men pulled a knife, but Anton was able to quickly retrieve his revolver, tearing through his body with 3 quickly timed shots. His body hit the ground, and the other one unsheathed a sharpened machete. He slashed at Anton, his blade slamming into the revolver and knocking it aside. Anton stumbled back before punching the man across the face and grabbing his wrist, twisting it backwards and knocking the blade from his hand. He then shoved the man backwards, knocking him through several empty tables. Anton grabbed his revolver, storming out of the bar. Cora followed closely behind, Kira, Lero, and I all going as well. I grabbed Kieran by the scruff of his shirt as we walked out, dragging him out of his seat. He took a final drink from the shop before we walked out, going back onto the path.
Damn drunks. Just can't get rid of them.
Anton muttered. Anton led us back over to the house and we all filed in. He closed it behind us and the door auto-locked. I then noticed a small staircase in the corner, going up to the 2nd floor.
Alright, so we got one bed, then a pull-up bed, a couch, and I'm sleeping on my bed upstairs. Help yourself to whatever food you want. I got a deal with a friend, so he has to provide me with food money whenever I say.
We're just gonna let a bunch of strangers stay here?
Asked Kira. He shrugged.
Yeah, you don't seem like bad folk, and I've dealt with worse than you. Worst case scenario, I walk out of here with 5 bodies and maybe a scratch or 2.
He walked up the stairs, leaving us alone. Before I could turn around and suggest something, I felt something latch onto my shoulder. I looked to the side, seeing Cora nibbling on my neck. Suddenly I felt weaker, but only a bit, and watched as Cora detached to reveal 2 fang marks.
What are you?
Asked Lyra as she reached for her sword. Cora swallowed the blood and spoke.
I'm part vampire. Got bit by a player a while ago. It's why I've been alone. I need blood. Well, any kind of liquid secretion from a human in order to survive.
I then watched as she opened the menu, hitting a few keys. We watched as a long black devil tail sprung from her back and she opened her mouth to reveal her fangs. We were all weirded out. Cora, however, opened the menu, pulling out something. It looked to be a green bottle, looking a bit dirty, but with a glowing creature inside.
Who wants to play spin the bottle?